Welcome everyone to the session today. This is a session that I feel is important to kind of understand the differences between some of the Microsoft apps. And this is actually one that I get questions on quite a bit because it's like, which app am I supposed to use? So it's going to depend on, of course, what it is that you need to do. So if you're familiar, of course, with Microsoft Excel, Excel is built to have over 16,000 columns going across. It has over 1 million rows going down. You have multiple sheet tabs related to a workbook. You understand that things are done in cells and you can do formulas and all of those kind of things. Lists, on the other hand, are very different. So today we wanted to discuss with you transitioning from the spreadsheets over to the SharePoint lists if it's the right fit. A lot of times we do use the wrong application for what it is that we need to do, but we want to think about the final outcome. What are we going to do with the data that we need to store? So first off, why transition to SharePoint lists? And this will be right on page 1 of your handout. One of the reasons is we do get real-time collaboration. It is a cloud-based application, so Microsoft Lists is all saved by default to the cloud. So it is something that we do have live collaboration automatically. Of course, Excel could have live collaboration as well if it is saved to a cloud and you share it with others. If it's on your OneDrive, it's on a SharePoint site, that kind of a thing. Of course, that technically could have live collaboration. But permission control is more granular when it comes to using a list over Excel. Both have different types of security measures, but things run a little bit differently when it comes to the security on the list side. The integration that we have with Microsoft Lists works differently, and you'll see some examples of that here today. It works differently than you would see in an Excel workbook as well. So the way that it connects with Power Apps and other applications like Microsoft Teams. And we'll see a demonstration of using lists within Teams as well. Data validation, which is, of course, the ability for us to be able to say, I want all of these cells in my worksheet to be formatted this way. I want them to only be able to put in this number of characters, those kind of things. It can be done in Excel, but it's done automatically in a list. And you'll kind of see that when we kind of compare the two. But data validation technically can be done in both, but it's built in lists. We have to manually do that in an Excel workbook. Views and filters, technically both have them. We have different views, which a lot of people don't even realize that we have these in Excel. There's different views that we can technically save, especially if you're doing live collaboration, but they don't work the way that a list view does. List views can be very user-friendly. We do have the capability of being able to filter the data, sort the data in both applications, but a list is confined to the columns and rows that we've already entered. Excel is not. Excel has lots of extra space that lists do not. Lists only refer to whatever number of records we've added in. To be honest, my biggest thing that I see the difference being is lists are more like a database. So if you're familiar with Access or any other database programs where we have a table in a datasheet view and each of the fields, which are your columns, each field is uniquely identified as either being, text, a number, a date, etc. Yes, we can enter that type of data in an Excel worksheet, but we have to tell Excel this range of cells we want to be dates. This range of cells is going to be text, etc. So it's very different in a list. So we'll see kind of, those differences as we kind of take a look at Excel versus a list, but really kind of keep in the back of your mind that it's really a lot like a database. And as a matter of fact, Microsoft has been kind of, I'm not real sure what the future is of Access. They say they're not getting rid of Microsoft Access right now, but a lot of things that we were using an Access database for really can be done in a list. So I've actually taken some of the information that I had in Access and tables and put them in lists because that's all I needed. I didn't need all of the other huge functionality that comes with Access. So anyway, just to give you a little bit to kind of get us started, lists really have a purpose. It's not just going to be a bunch of random information that we're going to be storing. We want to design them to track whatever information and store whatever information it is that we need. There are templates that we can use. Excel has templates too that can give us pre-formatted worksheets that we can use to track our data, but not like the templates that you're going to see in Microsoft Lists. When we talked about the views, a couple of the views that are available is if we have date-related information, we can actually have calendar views. We don't get that kind of capability in an Excel spreadsheet. We get what are called grid view. We can have gallery views. There's a lot of different types of views. It's not just taking, I filtered this list in Excel and I want that to be saved as a view for myself. It's very, very different when it comes to the views. The views are more like what we would use in a database, where if I had a form or I had a data sheet view that I had saved, a table view, those types of things that we can save. Those are what we are seeing and using in Microsoft Lists. We talked a little bit about the integration, but the integration goes a lot further than what I briefly had mentioned. When we talk about integration, Microsoft Lists can actually be a web part directly within a SharePoint site. I will show you in SharePoint how a list can be utilized, but it is a part of SharePoint. Can Excel be a part of it? Well, it can be a saved file. It could be embedded, but it's not, we would be more or less forcing it to be not something that Microsoft automatically includes. So there is a big difference with that integration that we have as well. Customization. You're going to see that it's very easy to customize a list. It has built-in power options available too that are very different from the power options that are in Excel. But that collaboration side works a little bit differently as well, because yes, though we could have multiple people in either, but the list is more like the database side, where it's built to automatically be a shared list that people are going to be doing data entry within. So definitely a lot of differences. So of course, Excel workbooks, when we think about a workbook, they're really used for data analysis. They're used for doing formulas, building pivot tables, building charts. We don't necessarily do pivot tables or charts with a list. It's more for data retrieval, data storage, processes, and things. Highly flexible? Yeah, Excel is definitely highly flexible with the different capabilities that it has. But really that data analysis is where Excel's going to shine, with the amount of records and how quickly and easily it can analyze or calculate things. Not that a list doesn't have some calculation capabilities, but it's more like a data sheet view in an Access database when it comes to the calculations. We could have a calculated field just like we do in Excel, but we wouldn't really be going to just a cell because we don't use cells in lists and do a formula. We don't do macros in lists, but of course we do a lot of macro type different structures in Excel workbooks. So if we want to automate processes, we can click on a button and have it run VBA code or a macro in the background. We don't do that in lists. Excel is a standalone. It can be used as a standalone application, but a file can be shared with others, to where lists, as you will see in a moment, are going to be more of it's built to share. We usually have lists that automatically are shared. The visualization, of course, an Excel file does do the charts and it has graphical objects available with it. We don't do those kind of things in a list. Okay, it's just not what we do. So lists versus Excel, just a couple of the key differences. Ease of use. Lists are actually a little bit easier to set up for tracking information or doing data entry. Customization. Lists are very straightforward when it comes to customizing, and you'll see that here in a minute when we do a demonstration on here's a column. This is what I want for the data type to be in that column. And then, of course, the collaboration and the, really that integration that we have with the other applications. So some of the top benefits for SharePoint lists are going to be the real-time collaboration, built for sharing capabilities, the custom views and filters that can be saved as views, those types of things, the data validation and the integration that we have with other applications. Permission and security levels are a lot higher than the features that we have within Excel, although I do like the security in Excel to be able to say, I only want people to fill out, to be able to go to these cells. We kind of have that already in lists, but we could technically do that in Excel if we needed to. It does have built-in automation with Power Automate and things like that directly within a list, so that's definitely a benefit. Of course, we've talked about that integration with other Microsoft apps. It is mobile friendly and accessible as well. So there is a list app that you can be using on a tablet or a phone where it makes it super easy to be able to look up or use your information. Version history and audit trails are done as well within a SharePoint list, just like we do have if your Excel workbook is saved to a cloud. There is custom formatting that can also be done. The scalability and the structure of how it's built is very different than Excel as well, and that is actually a huge benefit. So that's kind of more of that feel, that look and feel of it being more of a database. So in your handout, you will find a couple of different tables that will give you more of side-by-side comparisons of this is what happens in an Excel worksheet versus working in a SharePoint list. So when it comes to the versioning, the mandatory columns, canceling, sharing, validations, those types of things, I did give you a couple of different tables actually in your handout that you can look at side by side, different information. But when should you, and this is kind of the question that I get asked all the time, is when should I use Excel or when should I use a list? So just kind of very simply, to use Excel, if you want to do a lot of individual calculations, you want to create more of a dashboard look. Not that we can't use data from a list in a dashboard with Power BI, but Excel is built to do those kind of things too. If you want to do pivot tables, you want to have charts, you would go for Excel. If you're using large amounts of data and you want to do data modeling, you want to use Excel for that. Okay. You need offline access and advanced formatting capabilities. You would want to use Excel for those kind of things. If it's a Microsoft list, That's when you stop and think, okay, here's the data that I'm going to be using. Structured data for tracking specific information, and you'll see some examples, especially when we look at the templates. You want to automate workflows or integrate the list with Microsoft Teams or with a SharePoint site. That's where you definitely want to have a list. You want to have granular permission levels and real-time collaboration. That's going to be more of a list. I just need to track information that's going to be in this, 10 columns. I don't need the full capabilities of what Excel has to offer. A list would definitely be the choice that you want to consider. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at lists and different ways that a list can actually be created. So first we'll take a look at an existing list. So we're basically going to start with kind of the app itself. So Matthew, did someone have a question before I begin that?
Yeah, it looks like someone was wondering, can you link relationships and dependencies between tasks on lists?
So can you say that one more time? Can you link dependencies?
Can you link relationships and dependencies between tasks on lists?
Technically, no. But Planner does do that. So if you're going to be doing a task list that you want to say that, this is the deliverable and I want these as my subtasks under that deliverable, you're going to want to use Microsoft Planner. Not
Okay.
Excel, because Excel is just not meant to do that. Lists can be great for tracking things, doing a task list, as you'll see an example of, but they cannot really do those dependencies, so to say. Okay,
Okay.
you could force it to, but that would be more difficult. Planner would definitely be my choice for that. Okay, that was a good question, by the way.
Yeah.
So what I want to do is open the app for Microsoft Lists. So I'm logged into my Microsoft account. I went on the left-hand side, I clicked apps. You can see that you can access all your different apps. I'm just going to go to the right-hand side and click all apps. So you can see every app that you have available. Microsoft Lists is not an extra license. If you already have a license for 365, you already have Microsoft Lists. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the app just by clicking on the icon. And what it's going to do is take you to a main window that is going to give you access to creating new lists, which we'll walk through how to do that. And you're going to see a list of all of your recent lists and the lists that are just for yourself. What do I mean by all of that? Well, a coworker of mine could have created a list, and it could have been a part of a SharePoint team that I'm a part of. And if I'm a member of that team, I would have access to that list. I could access it here. I don't have to go to Microsoft Teams to access it. I really could be doing it directly here. So any list that you are an owner or a member of, whether you created it or somebody else created it, you will have access to it directly here from the app. You don't have to go to the SharePoint site that it was created in or it's connected to. You don't have to go to Microsoft Teams where it was created or connected to. You can actually access them all here. Totally up to you where you want to go to access an existing one. Okay? But just so you can see an example, these are all my recent. And you can see they can have different icons and things like that. So I have one called Issue Tracker that I can see as part of the accounting department. And I was last in it 12 days ago. I had one called Blood Drive, Executive Reports, Clinic Policies, those types of things. You could see all the names of these. I have some lists that I've starred to be favorites. Those are being displayed across the top. So if I have specific lists that I'm using more regularly, you can always click the star icon like we do in other Microsoft applications, and it can be part of your favorites list to make it quicker and easier for you to get to them. So besides having access to my recent lists, I also have a tab at the top here for my lists. So these are the lists that are my lists that I created instead of the ones that are for multiple people that somebody else could have created. These are the ones that I personally created. So recent versus my lists, just so you could see. So I'm just going to open one of these just so you can have an idea as to how this all works. So the one I'm going to start with is this one called Issue Tracker, just to show you what's in it. So once I click on it, it opens the actual list itself. So this is the app called Microsoft Lists. You can see that at the top left, very familiar. If you're familiar with document libraries, lists and document libraries have a lot of the same functionality. So if you understand document libraries, lists is easier to understand. Notice at the top left, I can add a new item. What that basically means is adding a new item to the list. That's what that means, and I'll demonstrate that in a moment. But then when you look at the menus going across the top, edit in grid view is just like the edit in grid view in a SharePoint document library. We also have an undo. We have a share button, which is the same as sharing in a normal document library, where we can share the entire list. Now, how does a list get shared? Well, a couple of different options. If you create a list yourself, just by being in the List app, I go to the List app, I create a brand new list, I can then choose to share it with others, which 99% of the time you do share your list. That is going to be one way to do it, is to just click the share icon across the top. When you do that, you're going to get the same share capabilities that you have in other applications when you go to share. You can put in the email addresses basically of who you want to share this with. And on the right-hand side, you can see that it has the same options for sharing, just like we see in document libraries, where they can edit, or we can say they can view only and they can't make changes to it. So sometimes I need people to have access to this list, but I don't want them to make changes to it. I need them to see it, but not change. So just so you know, you could do that. We can then put in a message and click send, and it will send a link via email to everybody that we shared it with. Also, you can do your standard copy a link. Copy a link, it's going to hold it in the clipboard, you go to wherever you want to paste it, and you could share it that way. That's not always how we do it though. We can also be in apps like SharePoint. And if we use a list from SharePoint, a SharePoint site, whoever is a member of that SharePoint site automatically would have access to that list. Okay? If I create a list through a channel of a team in Microsoft Teams, whoever has rights to that channel will have rights to that list. So we don't have to manage separately who the members are of the list. It's done through SharePoint or through Teams, which is where I use lists the most, to be honest. I usually have lists in a SharePoint site and or a team, but they can be used in other places. So let me explain a couple of other things. When you look at the top going across, you can copy a link directly from an icon as well. You can export the list to Excel as a CSV, export it to Power BI. We also have the capability of doing forms within lists, which is a little bit beyond our scope today, so we won't worry so much about that here today. But we also have automate features. I'll come back and talk more about those in a moment. And we have integration with Power Apps, Power Automate, and Power BI. So these are built in. We don't get that kind of capability in Excel. If you look at the left-hand side, there's an icon that can be chosen when you create the list. There's different types of icons that you can pick from, that kind of thing. You can see where it's located at is the accounting department, which is actually a channel. I'm sorry, a team. So this is actually part of a team called accounting department. So I'll show you that. The name of it is issue tracker, and there's that star. So just so you could see, I could click the star to have this be saved to the favorites list when I'm in the app itself. But underneath that is a row of the different columns. So unlike Excel, where you're going to see a grid with all the columns and rows that you have available, lists don't do that. We only see the names of the columns of what the columns are that we personally put into the list. So I have one called issue, I have issue description, priority, status, assigned to, date reported, issue source, images, etc. going across. And how we add a record to this list is by clicking the icon Add New Item. When you click Add New Item, it opens up a form view, similar to an Access database, opens up a form view, giving you each of the columns where you can do your data entry. So I'm going to say that the issue is lack of employees, and the description is for this project, we don't have enough resources. And then I'm going to go down to the next field where it says priority. What's very different is by default, when you create a list, it's very easy to be able to change the data type that you are using. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a moment. But this happens to be a list, a column that is a multiple choice. So we have the ability of choosing from a list of items. So I'm going to say that this is a high priority. We have a status column, which is the same, and I can have different colors with my entries that we're choosing. I'm going to say that this is in progress. I can choose who I want to assign this to. And the great thing about assigning, if you have a people column, a person column, you can actually have that be used in a workflow to say, if I get assigned to something, or I'm the responsible party for this record of information, I'm going to get a notification via email or whatever the case would be through a Power Automate workflow. I can have a column that is date related, where you click on it, it automatically gives you a date. I'm going to say the 11th is when actually it's being reported. It was on the 7th. The issue source, I could have a URL column. I could have more text. I could add images. Who logged the issue? I'm going to say that student 1 logged the issue. I could put in attachments just so you can see some of the field options that we have available. I'm going to click Save to save the changes to that record of information that I just typed in, and now you see that going across. You can see where it has the assigned to. It shows the profile of the person. So if it's a coworker of yours, it's an interactive link. So if I wanted to chat with that person, notice I'm seeing all kinds of information about that person. Or if I hesitate on student 1 over here, you could see that I can interactively use that other columns can be interactive, the data that we put in. But this particular list has some different tabs going on the top right. So first you're going to see on the right-hand side all these icons. We have filter, we have grouping capability, we have sorting capability, but then I have these other tabs. So the first tab is all items. So right now I'm seeing a list of every item. I also have issues grouped by person assigned. So if we want to view, and by the way, these views over here on the right, these tabs, I have issues grouped by priority, issues grouped by status. These came with a template. These were automatically created, but the program is so powerful that it allows you to go to add view, and we can always create our own custom views as well. We can have them accessible as a tab to make it super easy to change the way you're looking at things. So if I wanted to be able to see based on the assigned to, I want to group every one of the issues that we're tracking based on people, I can just simply click issues grouped by person assigned, and it's going to group them together that way. Now, if I decided that I wanted to change who the person is that's, edit a record of information, we can do that. We can edit a record of information at any time. One way is to select the record or records that you want to edit and go to the top of the menu and click edit. Or you have a ... menu. That will give you more actions to modify the specific record. Just like a document library, you could also right-click. So you can see some of your menu choices, which are very similar, I should say almost identical, to what we have in a document library. They're 99% the same as what we have in a document library. Now, I'll demonstrate a couple of these in a moment, but just to give you an idea as to how some of this works, if I decided that I needed to track additional information in this list, notice at the top of where the columns are, the names of all these columns going across, at the end is add column. So if we wanted to add an additional column of, whatever we wanted to track, we click add column. It will give you the list of the predefined column choices. This is in your handout as well, by the way, with the description of what each of these are. But if we are going to be entering text, we could choose that. If we want a choice, like we had with the priority or the status, we want it to be more of a drop-down list of this is what you can pick from, we could choose choice. Or if we need another date and time, maybe I need to know the date it was completed, I could add that as a column. We also have multiple lines of text. So if you're going to do a notes field where you want people to put in what was the resolution of this issue, blah, 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 you could have a notes column and that would be a multi-line. You also have person, which was the assigned to, and then we also had the who reported the issue. You can have a number, you can have it be a yes, no column, you can have it be a hyperlink, it can be currency, which yes, it can have a calculation to the currency. It could be location, image, managed metadata, lookup, and average rating. So just so you can see, we have a lot of different column types of pre-formatted data that would go within that column. So we don't do a mix of, some people might type in a date, some people might type text, some people might put in a number. We keep the columns to the specific data type. So just to show you, if I choose date, I'll choose date and time and I'll click next. It opens up a column on the right for you to create the column. So first off, what do you want to name it? I'm going to say date completed. I could put in a description, I could change the type, I could choose if I wanted to include a time or have a friendly format, if I wanted it to have a default value like today's date, that kind of a thing. I'm going to choose that just so you could see. I could use a calculated value, I won't. I'm going to just click save at the bottom once I do that. Then it's going to automatically add that as a new column. Columns, just so you know, can be rearranged. So if I want this column to go in a different location, I can click on the name of the column, and from there you can see sorting capabilities, filter capabilities, group capabilities, column settings, which allows me to, I can't move it to the right because it's at the end, but if I want to move this to the left, I can do that. or I want to change the width of a column, I want a column to be wider or more narrow, you can go to the right-hand side, just like in an Excel worksheet, and you would be able to automatically change the width of a column. Just so you could see, you have different capabilities for helping to manage that columns of data, different column settings. Okay, pin to filter pane. There's a totals column, which let me show you this totals column because this is an Access database feature that they brought into a list. Let's say that I need to count how many actual risks or issues we have. I could choose count. It will automatically add the count based on that column. Now, of course, that was a date column, so I probably wouldn't do it to that. Let me go back and change that to none. And let me go to issue. Matthew, I'll get to you in just 1 second if you don't mind. And I'm going to do a count on the issue, so it's counting how many issues we actually have in our view. Matthew, what was the question?
Yes, someone was wondering, is there a way to have recurring tasks with rolling dates? I.e., task 1 needs to be done every Tuesday. Task 2 has to be done 15 days from month end, and the last day of the month, etc. Things like that.
With Power Automate, yes.
Okay.
So it's not technically built to say this is going to be a reoccurring date. That's Planner. Once again, that's task lists are a little bit different.
Yeah.
I don't use Microsoft Lists so much for tasks, even though you can, but really what I use lists for is more of the columns and rows of records, because it doesn't do the dependencies, it doesn't have the reoccurring capabilities like we would have in Microsoft Planner. But let's take a look at templates so that people can get a better idea as to here's some options of how you could actually be using lists. Okay. So just so everybody can see, this is what it could end up looking like. But let me actually jump back to lists again. So I'm going to go back up to the top left, and I clicked on the icon for lists, and I'm back into the main app again. And if I wanted to create a list right now and use it, have it just be part of my list and then just share it with random people. If I wanted to be part of SharePoint, I would do it through the SharePoint site, or if I wanted to be part of Teams, I would do it through Teams. But I'll just quickly show you the templates that are available by clicking on Create New. If I click Create New, you're going to see that first I choose either Create from Blank, and I can create a list, a form, a gallery, a calendar, or a board. Beyond the scope today, but I could also import data from Excel, a CSV, or an existing list. But here are some different templates that help you to understand what kind of things you would use a list for. Microsoft continuously adds to this, by the way. But issue tracker is a template, employee onboarding, event itinerary, asset management, recruiting, travel requests, work tracker, content scheduler, playlist, gift ideas, expense tracker, another expense tracker one, product support matrix, job application tracker, apartment hunting. So a couple of personal ones, but mainly they're really built for business. But let me show you one. I'll go into Asset Manager. So what you're going to see when you click on any of these templates is you'll see a brief kind of overview as to what it's going to give you by default. So it's got a device photo, it's got an asset tag, a column for status, manufacturer, the model, etc. And I can scroll across and see the other columns that it's going to come with. Gives you a description over on the right. If I decide, hey, I want to use this, I click Use Template, then I need to give it a name, and I'll just keep Asset Manager. I'm going to click Create, and it's automatically going to create it in my lists. If I want it to be available someplace else, I can click the down arrow and choose a SharePoint site or a Microsoft team. And then I could choose a channel, etc. I'm going to say I want this to be part of Clinic. I'm going to say I want it to be part of Clinic. I'm going to click Create. Clinic is a SharePoint site, by the way. It's going to show it in the SharePoint sites navigation. And here is the default template that I got. It does have some built-in views at the top right. It's already predetermined as to what the columns are going to be, but of course you can always modify that. You could change the existing information by just going to the column itself. So if I go to manufacturer, I could go to column settings. I could hide it so they can't see it. We can actually change by adding in new columns. We can edit the column. So if I say edit, I could change the name. I could change my choices, that type of thing. Just so you could see, you can always make modifications to those. So this would be one way to create it. Because when I created it, I said I wanted it to be a part of a SharePoint site. I could access this directly through that site, or I can access it from the URL at the top because it does have a URL that I could save to my favorites across my internet browser. I can access it lots of different ways. But just to show you, if I actually go to that SharePoint site, I'm going to go to this Clinic SharePoint site, where you can see on the left-hand side, I've got a policy list, I've got a task list. You can see these different items that have been added. Okay, so we can actually access things directly through the SharePoint site or a team. Now, just to show you, task list, this was a template that I created a task list from, just so you know. And from here, which by the way, my asset manager was just a little slow on adding there, but it's there. But this task list is Microsoft Planner. Very different from this policy list, which is a Microsoft list. But we can always add and remove whatever it is we want. So just so you could see, I could easily have a list available within a SharePoint site that everybody would have access to. So this is a list of policies that I keep track of because every year we need to update the policy, and I can set a workflow that says I want to have the person responsible be notified 1 month prior to the due date. So we can build those workflows in to say, email this person, 30 days before the due date that we have entered. And I could have a column that is a link to the actual file. Just kind of think about the things that it is that you need to store. Lists are great options for that. But everybody that is a part of this clinic site has access to this list. On the left-hand side in the SharePoint site, if I click home, this takes me to the home page of the SharePoint site. And from there, I could create a new list. Just so you know, there's other ways to create a new list. If I go to the top left and click New, I could choose List. From there, I could create a new list that would automatically be added to this SharePoint site. So we get the same window that you saw a moment ago. Now, just so you can see this option as well, we could also be doing this with Microsoft Teams. So if I want to have a team that has a channel that has a list, we can do that as well. Before I show that, Matthew, did you have a question?
Yeah, someone is wondering, if I create a list for something like a staff schedule, can I publish just the calendar view to SharePoint? So share that calendar view of that list in SharePoint.
Yes.
Yes, you can do that.
Yes.
And then
you definitely can.
And they can't edit that list, but they can view it.
When you share it, we can have different permissions on that list that say view only. That's where the stronger permission levels can come in. So the answer is definitely a yes.
And so if you wanted to make that file editable to your coworkers, you could do that as well.
Correct.
Within SharePoint.
Correct.
Great, thank you.
But just so you know, in SharePoint, there is a web part that's called Calendar. And when that's created, you have a Microsoft 365 group that includes a calendar.
Mm,
So you want to kind of think about which option is really going to give you the benefits that you need. Okay.
right,
Yeah. Because you have multiple choices with that. Okay. And things do not need to be public. We can have control over those as well. Because SharePoint has a lot of permission levels. Okay. So
right.
depending on what the needs are.
Great,
But
thank you.
just so you can see, if we're in Microsoft Teams, we can have a list here as well. We can either create a brand new list or connect to an existing list. So if I go to the accounting department team that I have here in Microsoft Teams, and I go to accounts payable, you can see up at the top, I've got all these different tabs. Notice this one called Issue Tracker. If I click on that, it's going to take me to that same one that I opened through the list app itself. So this is exactly that same one. So here's that record that I added for the issue a little bit ago, that lack of employees. Here's that record that I added in. So people can be using it from the app, from a shortcut of the URL, from within Microsoft Teams or within SharePoint. We have a lot of different ways, or on the mobile device, we have a lot of different ways that we can access our list information. So if you create a new list, so let's say that I'm in the marketing department and I have this team called marketing, and we need a list to be able to track all of our billboard information. I could go to the channel that I want to have it available in. So I'll just say I want it in general for right now. Up at the top, I can click on the plus sign. To add an app, I can then click list. So I can create a list right within Teams as well. So 3 different ways I can create a list. So I'm going to click save. It's going to take me into creating that list. So how do I want to create that list? So I can create new, or I can add an existing list. I'm going to say create new. And I'm going to say I want it to be blank. I'm not going to use a template. I want it to be blank. Just so you could see what a blank list would look like. On the right-hand side, I need to give it a name, and I'm going to say it's going to be called billboards, because our company has a bunch of billboards that we advertise on, and we need to have a list of, here's the billboard, here's its location, here's the size of it, the traffic count, whatever you keep track of on billboards. I shouldn't use something I'm not as familiar with, but I designed a billboard once. That's as much as I really know about billboards. But just so you could see, it automatically takes me into this list, but the only field you're going to get, the only column, is title. That is always there by default. If I go to add column, I'm going to pre-plan this, by the way, and I'm going to think about what do we need to track in this list. So I'm going to do text. I'm going to click next, and I'm going to say that I want to name it location. So where is this billboard located at? I'm just going to click save, and it automatically gives me that column. Then I'm going to continue to click add column. And I could choose whatever it is that I need, like size, whatever. I keep adding in all the fields that we need to be able to track the information related to our billboards. But the best part about all this is when you have that list created, let's say that it's an expense report. Let's say that it's expense report information that you're tracking. And let's say that somebody fills out a form that is their expense report information. So I fill out an expense report form. I can submit the form and have the form automatically populate a list. By using Power Automate, it is super easy to say, take the contents of this form, put it into my billboards list, and then notify someone that a new record was added, or notify the responsible party, notify the, based on the department name, if they said I'm part of, such and such, we know that through the Power Automate that anytime that a person from, accounting fills out an expense report, it automatically goes to this manager. So we can have all of this automated and have the capability of having custom views, sorting and filtering capabilities within our lists. To me, this is such an easy to use tool that I have taken a lot of my old databases, as I mentioned, and I've taken a lot of my old Excel spreadsheets and converted them into lists instead.